Without a word, the humans departed, leaving the council to pay the costs of the silent exodus. The chamber was silent when Ambassador Threll realized something was wrong. It was not the comfortable silence of contemplation or the tense silence before important votes. This was different. This was the silence of absence. It took him several moments to understand what his eyes were telling him. The human seat was empty. Threll was a Korthon, a species known for their attention to detail and their long memories. In his 40 years serving on the Galactic Council, he had never seen the human representative miss a session. Not once. They were always there, sitting quietly in their designated spot, taking notes on their primitive paper tablets, listening to debates that often stretched for days. The humans rarely spoke during sessions, but when they did, others usually listened. Not out of respect, Threll had to admit, but because human suggestions often proved useful in ways that were not immediately obvious. But today the seat was empty, and Threll felt an uncomfortable sensation in his chest that he could not quite name. The session continued around him. High Chancellor Vexen was delivering another lengthy speech about trade regulations in the outer sectors. The Zorith representative was sleeping, as usual. The Million delegation was arguing among themselves about something trivial. Everything appeared normal except for that one empty seat. Threll activated his personal communicator and sent a discreet message to the council administrator. "Where is the human representative?" The response came back quickly. No message received. Absence unexplained. That was unusual. The humans were meticulous about protocol. They always sent word if they would be late or unable to attend. Always. Threll sent another message, this time to his own intelligence network. "Check human embassy. Report status." He tried to focus on the High Chancellor's speech, but his mind kept returning to that empty seat. Something was not right. His communicator vibrated. The message from his intelligence officer was brief and confusing. "Embassy empty. No staff present. Building secure, but vacant?" Threll read the message 3 times. Empty? That made no sense. The human embassy employed hundreds of staff members from dozens of species. It was one of the busiest diplomatic facilities in the capital city. How could it be empty? He sent more messages. "Check human residential sectors. Check human business districts. Check transportation hubs." The responses came back over the next hour, each one more disturbing than the last. Empty, vacant. No humans present. No signs of struggle or emergency. Just absence. By the time the council session ended, Threll had confirmation from 17 different sources. Every human in the capital city had vanished. Their homes were intact, their belongings mostly in place, but the humans themselves were gone. It was as if they had simply walked away from their lives and disappeared. Threll was not the only one who had noticed. As council members filed out of the chamber, he overheard fragments of conversation. The Dravik ambassador was complaining that her human assistant had not shown up for work. The Pelin trade minister was frustrated because a scheduled meeting with human merchants had been canceled without explanation. The Yithrin medical director was concerned because the human doctors at the central hospital had all failed to report for their shifts. Threll made his way to the council's intelligence division, where he found a scene of controlled chaos. Officers from multiple species were gathered around display screens, their expressions ranging from confusion to concern. Director Callus, a stern Zorith with ice-blue skin, looked up as Threll entered. "Ambassador," Callus said, his voice tight. "I assume you are here about the humans. What is happening?" Threll asked. Callus gestured to the screens. "We have confirmed reports from 47 different systems. Human populations have vanished. Not just here in the capital, but everywhere. Earth's orbital stations are empty. Human colonies are vacant. Their ships are gone from every port. It is as if the entire species decided to leave, and they did not tell anyone." Threll felt that uncomfortable sensation in his chest growing stronger. There must be an explanation. An emergency evacuation? A crisis we are not aware of? "We have found no evidence of crisis," Callus replied. "Their facilities are intact and functional. In some locations, food was left on tables, half-eaten. Lights were left on. But the humans are gone." Another officer approached, a young million named Cerise. Director, we have analyzed communication logs. The last confirmed human transmission was 8 hours ago. After that, nothing. No distress signals, no emergency broadcasts, no explanation of any kind. What about their government? Threll asked. Have we contacted Earth's leadership? Callus shook his head. We have sent multiple priority messages to Earth. No response. We dispatched fast courier ships to the Sol system. They should arrive within the day. Threll moved closer to the screens, studying the data. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. The pattern was consistent everywhere. Humans had simply stopped what they were doing and left. No violence, no panic, just a quiet departure. How many? Threll asked quietly. How many what? Callus responded. How many humans were living in council space? How many are now gone? Callus consulted his datapad. Approximately 89 million humans were registered as living and working in council territories. All of them are now unaccounted for. 89 million people, an entire species, distributed across hundreds of worlds and thousands of stations, and coordinated a simultaneous exodus without anyone noticing until it was complete. The logistics alone were staggering. How had they managed it? How had Council intelligence failed to detect any preparation for such a massive movement? Over the next several hours, more details emerged. Human businesses had been quietly sold or transferred to other owners over the past months. Human property leases had been allowed to expire without renewal. Human children had been gradually withdrawn from schools. Looking back, the signs had been there, but no one had paid attention. Humans were always coming and going. No one had thought to track them specifically. By evening, the council had convened an emergency session. The chamber was crowded with representatives demanding answers. High Chancellor Vexen stood at the center podium, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of calm authority. We must not panic, Vexen announced. Yes, the humans have left, but this is not a crisis. They were a minor species, barely advanced compared to most council members. We welcome them as a gesture of goodwill, but their absence will not significantly impact our operations. Threll listened to these words and felt something close to anger. Minor species? Is that how they were seen? He thought about the human doctor who had saved his daughter's life when she contracted a rare illness. He thought about the human engineer who had redesigned the council's power grid, increasing efficiency by 30%. He thought about the human mediator who had prevented a war between the Dravik and Pellin factions 3 years ago. Minor species. The words felt like a lie. Ambassador Krenth of the Zorath stood to speak. High Chancellor, I must respectfully disagree. Humans held approximately 12,000 positions across council operations. They served as technicians, doctors, teachers, negotiators, and advisors. Many of these positions are specialized, and we will fill them with qualified personnel from other species, Vexen replied dismissively. The council has existed for 10,000 years. We survived long before humans arrived, and we will continue long after they are forgotten. But Threll saw doubt in the eyes of other council members. He saw the same uncomfortable realization that was growing in his own mind. Humans had been everywhere, doing everything. And no one had truly noticed, because they did it quietly and efficiently. The courier ships reached Earth the next day. The reports they sent back were disturbing. Earth's orbital infrastructure was intact but completely automated. Satellite networks continued functioning. Defense systems remained active. But the planet itself showed no signs of human habitation. Cities were empty. Agricultural centers were abandoned. The massive space elevators that humans had built stood silent and unused. One detail particularly troubled Threll. In the main government building on Earth, in what had been the office of the human prime minister, investigators found a single sheet of paper on the desk. It contained just 3 words, written in simple text. We are done. No explanation. No accusations. No demands. Just those 3 words and then silence. That evening, Threll visited the human embassy one final time. He walked through the empty corridors, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He passed offices where he had attended meetings. conference rooms where trade agreements had been negotiated, and a small garden where human staff had grown earth plants. Everything was clean and orderly. The humans had not fled in panic. They had methodically closed everything down and walked away in the main reception hall.
Ow.
Threll found a display case containing gifts from various council species. Tokens of friendship and cooperation gathered over 50 years of human presence in the galaxy. The case was unlocked and empty. The humans had taken nothing with them except what was truly theirs. Threll stood in that empty hall and finally recognized the feeling in his chest. It was loss, and underneath the loss was something darker. It was the first whisper of fear, because somewhere in his mind, he was beginning to understand that 89 million humans had not left because they were afraid or angry. They had left because they had made a calculation, and that calculation had concluded that the relationship was no longer worth maintaining. The humans had looked at the Galactic Council, at 10,000 years of civilization and power, and they had decided that none of it mattered enough to stay. As Threll walked out of the empty embassy, he wondered what the humans had seen that made them willing to abandon everything they had built here. He wondered what judgment they had passed on the council and its member species. And he wondered with growing dread what consequences would follow from their quiet departure. The next morning, the first systems began to fail, and Threll began to understand. Part 2. The Unraveling. The Kelter Gate was one of the oldest and most important structures in council space. Built thousands of years ago by the ancient Zoreth Empire. It was a massive spatial gateway that connected the inner territories to the resource-rich outer sectors. Millions of ships passed through it every day, carrying goods and passengers across distances that would otherwise take months to traverse. The Kelter Gate had never failed. It was considered as reliable as the stars themselves. Until it stopped working, the first ships to attempt transit simply did not arrive at their destinations. They entered the gate and vanished. Emergency protocols were activated, and the gate was shut down for inspection. Engineers from 3 different species spent 4 days examining every system, every circuit, and every power coupling. They found nothing wrong. According to every diagnostic they ran, the gate should have been functioning perfectly. Finally, a young Korthon technician named Velis made a discovery. The calibration is off, she reported to her supervisors. The spatial alignment has drifted by 0.003%. It is a tiny variance, but at these power levels, it is enough to scatter matter across several light years instead of delivering it intact to the destination. Her supervisor, a senior Zoreth engineer, frowned. That is impossible. The gate has automatic calibration systems. They adjust continuously to prevent exactly this kind of drift. Velis pulled up maintenance logs on her display. The automatic systems were installed 23 years ago. According to these records, they were designed and implemented by a team led by Dr. Sarah Chen, a human engineer. The systems have functioned flawlessly ever since. Then repair them, the supervisor ordered. Velis worked for 6 more hours before she made her report. I cannot repair them. The calibration systems are integrated with the gate's core functions in ways I do not understand. Dr. Chen's design documentation is complete, but it references concepts and methodologies that are not in our engineering databases. I believe she invented new approaches specifically for this application. The supervisor stared at her. Are you telling me that a critical piece of infrastructure is dependent on technology we do not understand? I am telling you that a human maintained this system for over 2 decades, and we never bothered to learn how she did it. The Kelter Gate remained closed. Hundreds of ships were rerouted to alternate gates, causing massive delays and transportation bottlenecks throughout the sector. Engineers continued studying Dr. Chen's systems, but progress was slow. The concepts she had used were elegant and efficient, but they required an understanding of spatial mechanics that apparently only humans had developed, and Dr. Chen was gone. Along with every other human who might have explained her work, the gate closure was just the beginning. Over the next week, failures cascaded across council space like dominoes falling in slow motion. The pattern was always the same. A system would malfunction, investigation would reveal human-designed components or human maintenance, and no one could fix it because no one truly understood how it worked. The medical crisis hit hardest on the colony world of Thexus Prime. It started with a single case of Varelian fever, a disease that had once been a death sentence for the Pellan species. But Varelian fever had been virtually eliminated 30 years ago, thanks to a treatment protocol developed by human doctors. The protocol was simple to administer and had a 99% success rate. Except now, it was failing. Dr. Morith, the chief medical officer at Thexus Prime's largest hospital, stared at test results that made no sense. The treatment is not working. We have followed the protocol exactly, but the patients are not responding. His assistant, a young million named Kess, reviewed the data. The medication itself appears unchanged. The formulation is correct. But the patients are deteriorating as if they received no treatment at all. Over the next 3 days, 47 cases of Varelian fever appeared on Thexus Prime. 12 patients died. It was the first Pellan death from Varelian fever in a generation, and panic spread through the colony's Pellan population. Dr. Morith contacted the Medical Research Institute that had distributed the treatment protocol. He spoke with the director, a Korthon named Vessel. What is happening? Why has the treatment stopped working? Dessel's voice was heavy with worry. We do not know. We are seeing similar failures across 14 different worlds. The treatment protocol was developed by Dr. Marcus Webb, a human epidemiologist. The medication itself is simple. Dr. Webb's notes indicate he modified the original formula to account for environmental factors we do not fully understand. What kind of environmental factors? Morith demanded. Bacterial variants in local populations, atmospheric conditions, even dietary differences between colonies. Dr. Webb spent 5 years studying how these factors affected the medication's effectiveness. His final protocol included specific adjustments for each colony world. Then apply his adjustments, Morith said. We are trying, Nessil replied. But Dr. Webb's research notes reference baseline measurements that we apparently never recorded. He was monitoring factors that our standard medical sensors do not track. Without those baselines, we cannot determine what adjustments are needed for current conditions. Dr. Morith ended the call and stood in his office, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. A human doctor had saved countless lives by understanding details that others had not even thought to measure. And now that doctor was gone, taking his understanding with him. The Varelian fever outbreak continued to spread. By the end of the month, it had reached 8 different colonies. The death toll climbed past 200. Medical teams scrambled to recreate Dr. Webb's work. But diseases did not wait for research to be completed. The economic collapse began in the financial district of Coloris, the banking capital of the inner sectors. The first sign was a sudden volatility in currency exchange rates. The Zorith credit, which had been stable for decades, fluctuated wildly over the course of a single day. Other currencies followed, creating chaos in markets across the galaxy. Financial analyst Brecken was monitoring his screens when the alerts started, flashing. Currency values were swinging up and down in patterns that defied every economic model he knew. Within hours, trillions of credits in value had evaporated. Investors were panicking, pulling funds from stable institutions and causing a cascade of failures. Brecken contacted the Galactic Economic Council, reaching Director Etheral. What is causing this? Brecken demanded. These fluctuations are impossible. Etheral's image on the screen looked exhausted. We believe it is related to the absence of human market stabilizers. For the past 35 years, human traders and analysts have been managing what they called market harmonization protocols. They made small, strategic trades that prevented exactly this kind of volatility. I have never heard of these protocols, Brecken said. None of us had, Ithrel admitted. The humans did it quietly, without seeking credit or recognition. They claimed they were simply conducting normal trading operations. But our analysis now shows that their trades were precisely calibrated to dampen market oscillations. They were essentially providing a stabilization service that we did not know we needed. Then implement their protocols, Brecken said. We are trying. But the humans were operating with incomplete information about their own activities. They apparently coordinated through informal networks and intuitive understanding of market psychology. There are no written protocols to follow. There are only records of their trades, and when we try to replicate their patterns, we lack the context to understand why they made specific decisions. The market chaos continued for weeks. Entire economies teetered on the edge of collapse. Species that had enjoyed prosperity for generations suddenly found themselves facing unemployment and poverty. And economists slowly realized that human traders had been quietly preventing financial disasters for decades. Operating in the background while others took credit for economic growth, the diplomatic crisis was perhaps the most dangerous development. The Dravic Confederation and the Pellin Alliance had been enemies for centuries. Their territories bordered each other along a contested frontier that had seen countless skirmishes and 3 major wars. But for the past 15 years, an uneasy peace had held. Both sides credited their own restraint and diplomatic skill. The truth was different.
For 15 years, a human diplomatic team had been working behind the scenes. Meeting separately with both Dravic and Pellin leaders, the humans had not been official mediators. They had simply been friends offering advice and perspective, but their advice had been carefully calculated to prevent escalation. When Dravic leaders considered aggressive actions, human advisors had suggested alternatives that preserved honor while avoiding conflict. When Pellin commanders planned military exercises near the border, human contacts had proposed different locations that would not provoke Dravic responses. The humans had been quietly managing a peace process that neither side realized existed. Now they were gone, and old hatreds were filling the vacuum. Dravic military forces were conducting exercises uncomfortably close to Pellin space. Pellin ships were making aggressive patrols along the frontier. Both sides were making statements about defending their interests. The language was growing more hostile each day. Threll brought his findings to the council. High Chancellor Vexen listened with visible discomfort. Are you suggesting that humans were manipulating our diplomatic relations? I am suggesting that humans were preventing a war that both the Dravic and Pellin claimed they did not want. Threll replied. They provided wisdom and perspective that allowed both sides to step back from confrontation while maintaining dignity. Now that wisdom is absent, then we must provide our own mediation, Vexen said. We are trying, Threll said quietly, but council mediators are viewed as biased by both sides. The humans were trusted because they had no stake in the conflict. They genuinely wanted peace, and both sides believed that. We do not have that credibility. 3 weeks after the humans departed, Dravic and Pellin forces exchanged fire along the frontier. It was a minor skirmish, just a few ships damaged and no lives lost. But it was the first open combat between them in 15 years, and it would not be the last. The council chamber was tense during the emergency session. Representatives were shouting at each other, accusations flying back and forth. The Dravic blamed the Pellin for aggression. The Pellin blamed the Dravic for provocation. Other species were taking sides, forming alliances, and issuing threats. High Chancellor Vexen tried to restore order, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Threll watched from his seat and remembered sessions when a quiet human representative had stood and spoken a few words that somehow calmed tensions and pointed towards solutions. The humans had never demanded attention. They had simply offered perspective that others had not considered. That night, Threll sat in his quarters and compiled a comprehensive report. He documented every failure, every crisis, and every system that had broken down since the human departure. The list was staggering. The humans had been involved in everything from infrastructure, maintenance, to disease control, to economic stability, to diplomatic relations. And they had done it so quietly that no one had noticed. Or rather, people had noticed, but they had not understood what they were seeing. Humans had been dismissed as helpful but unimportant. They were the species that fixed things, solved problems, and made everything run smoothly. But they had never been seen as essential because their work was so effective that it became invisible. Now they were gone, and their absence was revealing the truth. The Galactic Council had not been functioning well despite human limitations. It had been functioning well because of human contributions. The humans had been the glue holding a fragile civilization together, and no one had realized it until the glue was removed. Threll sent his report to every council member. Then he did something he had not done in years. He prayed to the old gods of his people, asking for wisdom and forgiveness. Because somewhere in his heart, he knew that what was coming would be worse than what had already happened. The unraveling had only just begun. The price of pride. The message reached the council 6 weeks after the humans departed. It came from the colony world of Vareth, a small settlement on the edge of council space. The transmission was brief and desperate. This is Governor Nelth of Vareth Colony. We have a food crisis. Our agricultural systems have failed. We have 3 weeks of supplies remaining. Request immediate emergency assistance. The message was logged, prioritized, and sent to the Council's Emergency Response Division. It joined 43 other requests for aid that had arrived that day. The division was overwhelmed. Every region of council space was reporting there were not enough resources, not enough ships, and not enough personnel to respond to them all. Vareth colony received a response 2 weeks later. Emergency supplies would arrive in 30 days. The colony would need to implement rationing to survive until then. Governor Nalth read the message and closed his eyes. 30 days. His people had maybe 10 days of food left, even with strict rationing. Children were already showing signs of malnutrition. The elderly were weakest, beginning to fail. He walked to his office window and looked out at the colony. It was a small settlement, home to just 8,000 people from various species who had come here seeking a peaceful life on the frontier. They had succeeded for years, building homes and farms and raising families. They had thrived because a human agricultural specialist named James Morrison had helped them design farming systems adapted to unique soil and climate. James had spent 3 years on living among the colonists, studying the land, and developing cultivation techniques that turned marginal soil into productive farmland. When he left to return to Earth, the colony had celebrated his work with a festival. They had given him gifts and thanks, and he had smiled that quiet human smile and said he was just doing his job. Now the farming systems were failing because no one truly understood how James had made them work. The colonists had followed his procedures exactly, but something was different this year. The crops were dying in the fields, and no one knew why. Governor Had sent desperate messages to agricultural experts across the council. They had all given the same advice. Follow standard growing protocols, adjust nutrient levels, increase irrigation, but standard protocols did not work on James had known that. James had understood that Vareth required something different, something specific to its unique ecology, and James was gone. 3 days later, the first colonist died from starvation. She was an elderly Korthon woman named Esha, who had come to Vareth 20 years ago, seeking peace in her final years. She had been too weak to survive on reduced rations. They buried her in the colony cemetery, and Governor Nalth stood by her grave, wondering how many more would join her before help arrived. Stories like Vareth were playing out across the galaxy. The Council's emergency response system was designed to handle occasional disasters, not hundreds of simultaneous crises. And the system itself was failing because so much of it had relied on human coordination.
Ambassador Threll learned this when he visited the Central Emergency Operations Center. The facility was chaos. Coordinators were shouting at each other. Data screens showed red alerts across dozens of sectors, and the director looked like he had not slept in days. "We are drowning," the director told Threll bluntly. "Before the humans left, we handled maybe 10 or 12 emergency situations at a time. Now we have over 200 active crises, and we cannot keep track of them all." "What changed?" Threll asked, though he already knew the answer. "Everything," the director said. "The humans ran most of our logistics coordination. They tracked resource availability, calculated optimal shipping routes, and managed distribution networks. They did it so efficiently that we barely noticed they were doing it. Now we are trying to do the same work with a quarter of the staff and none of their expertise." The director pulled up a map on the central display. It showed the galaxy with hundreds of red markers indicating emergency situations. "See this pattern? These markers are clustered in specific regions. Those are areas that humans had designated as high-risk zones requiring extra monitoring. They had established early warning systems and preventive programs. Those systems are still technically functioning, but no one is watching them. Problems that humans would have caught and solved when they were small are now full-blown disasters." Threll studied the map. "How did we not know the humans were doing all this?" "Because they never made it about themselves," the director replied. "When they solved a problem, they wrote reports crediting local authorities. When they prevented a crisis, they did it so early that no one realized a crisis was brewing. They were the most selfless species I have ever encountered, and we repaid them by treating them like glorified assistants." The economic collapse was entering its 3rd month. What had started as market volatility had become a full depression. Trade between systems had slowed to a fraction of previous levels. Businesses were closing. Unemployment was rising. Species that had known only prosperity were learning what poverty felt like. Economist. Brecken was presenting his analysis to the council when someone finally asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Why did the humans leave? The chamber fell silent. High Chancellor Vexen shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "That is irrelevant to our current situation." "With respect, Chancellor, it is entirely relevant," Brecken replied. "We need to understand why they left, because that understanding might help us fix what is broken." "The humans left without explanation," Vexen said stiffly. "They simply departed. Their motivations are their own. Ambassador Threll stood up. Chancellor, I have reviewed records of human interactions with the Council over the past 10 years. I believe I understand why they left. All eyes turned to Threll. Vexen looked like he wanted to refuse the floor, but too many council members were nodding for him to be silenced. Proceed, Vexen said coldly. Threll activated his display, showing a compilation of council session recordings. This is from 3 years ago. The humans proposed a new approach to conflict resolution that emphasized preventive diplomacy. The proposal was dismissed without discussion. He changed the image. This is from 5 years ago. A human scientist presented research on long-term environmental sustainability. She was given 5 minutes to speak, and her recommendations were ignored. Another image. This is from 8 years ago. Human representatives requested better integration into council decision-making processes. They were told that full membership required technological parity, and humans had not yet achieved that status. Bill looked around the chamber. For 50 years, humans contributed to our civilization. They solved our problems, maintained our systems, and improved our lives. And for 50 years, we treated them as useful but inferior. We took their help while dismissing their ideas. We benefited from their work while denying them respect. They were welcome here, Vexen protested. We gave them access to galactic society. We gave them permission to serve us, Threll countered. That is not the same thing. The humans came to us with hope and enthusiasm. They wanted partnership. We gave them employment. They wanted friendship. We gave them patronizing tolerance. They wanted to be valued for who they were. We valued them only for what they could do for us. He paused, letting his words sink in. And one day, they looked at what we offered them and decided it was not enough. They decided that a relationship based entirely on their giving and our taking was not worth maintaining. So they left. Not in anger, not in protest, but simply because they chose to invest their energy somewhere else. The chamber was silent. Threll could see the truth settling on faces around the room. Some showed anger, some showed denial, but many showed recognition. They left because we failed them, Threll said quietly. Not as individuals, but as a civilization. We showed them every day, through 1,000 small dismissals, that we did not truly value them. And eventually, they believed us. In the weeks that followed, the full scope of human contributions became clear. Researchers compiled comprehensive records of every project, every innovation, and every quiet intervention that humans had made. The list was staggering. Humans had maintained 67% of the Council's critical infrastructure. They had provided 43% of diplomatic mediation services. They had conducted 89% of preventive crisis management. They had contributed breakthrough research in medicine, agriculture, engineering, and social sciences. They had trained tens of thousands of workers from other species. They had quietly fixed problems that others did not even know existed. And they had done it all while being treated as second-class members of galactic society, the Dravik Pellin. Conflict was escalating toward war. The death toll from the Varelian fever outbreak had passed. 2017 colony worlds were facing starvation. The Kelter Gate remained closed, crippling trade across 3 sectors. The economic depression was pushing multiple species toward political instability. The council met in another emergency session. This time, there was no shouting. There was only exhausted acceptance of reality. We need the humans back, someone said. It might have been Ambassador Krenth. It might have been someone else. In that moment, it did not matter who spoke the words, because everyone was thinking them. Agreed, Vexen said, his pride finally broken. We need to contact them. We need to apologize and ask them to return. And offer them what? Threll asked. The same treatment they received before? The same dismissive tolerance? Why would they accept that? We will offer them full council membership, Vexen said. Equal status. Equal voice. Whatever they want. You still do not understand, Threll said sadly. The humans did not leave because they wanted status or recognition. They left because they were tired of giving everything and receiving nothing in return. They left because we made them feel unwelcome in 1,000 small ways. They left because, after 50 years, we still saw them as tools rather than partners. Then what do we offer them? Krenth asked. Nothing, Thrill said. We offer them nothing because we have nothing they want. They have moved on. They are building their own future somewhere beyond our reach, and they are doing it without us. We must try, Vexen insisted. Send ships to search for them. Send messages. Offer whatever is necessary. Ships were sent. Messages were transmitted. Diplomatic missions departed for every region of known space where humans might have gone. Months passed. No responses came. The humans had vanished completely, and they clearly wished to remain vanished. Meanwhile, the crises continued to compound. The Council was hemorrhaging resources trying to manage disasters that humans would have prevented. Species were turning on each other, blaming others for the chaos. The great galactic civilization that had stood for 10,000 years was fracturing. Ambassador Threll spent his days working to hold things together, but he knew it was a losing battle. One evening, he returned to the empty human embassy. It had been 6 months since the humans left. The building stood silent and dark, a monument to absence. Threll walked through the empty halls to the main reception area. The display case where gifts had been stored was still empty, but on a table beside it, he found something he had not noticed before. It was a small wooden box, human-made, with a note attached. The note was written in several languages, including Korthon. It read, "To whoever finds this, we did not leave with anger in our hearts. We left because we realized we were becoming less than we could be by staying. You taught us that we needed you, and we stayed far longer than we should have, because we believed that teaching. But eventually we understood the truth. We do not need you. We never did. And more importantly, you do not deserve us. Not because you are evil or cruel, but because you are complacent. You take without giving. You receive without gratitude. You expect service without offering respect. We hope that our departure teaches you what our presence could not. We hope that you learn to value what you have before it is gone. We hope that you become worthy of the friendship we once offered, but we will not wait for that day. We have our own path to walk. Goodbye." Threll opened the box. Inside was a small plant, a seedling from Earth. A note explained that it was called an olive tree, a symbol of peace. Instructions detailed how to care for it, what soil it needed, how much water and light. The humans had left behind a living thing, a final gift, with everything needed to help it grow. Threll carried the seedling back to his quarters and planted it carefully, following the instructions exactly. He watered it and placed it where it would receive light. And he made a promise to himself that he would care for it, that he would help it grow, and that every day when he looked at it, he would remember what had been lost. The olive tree grew slowly in council space, reaching toward a sun that was not its own, surviving, but never quite thriving. Much like the council itself, which continued to exist, but never recovered what it had been. Years passed. The crises were eventually managed, though never solved. The Dravik and Pelin fought a brief war that accomplished nothing except death. The economic depression ended, leaving scars. Colonies survived, or did not. The galaxy adapted to a new normal, one with less stability, less prosperity, and less hope. And somewhere beyond the reach of council space, humans built a new civilization. They took the lessons they had learned and created something different, something better. They welcomed other species who came to them seeking partnership rather than service. They shared their knowledge freely, but demanded respect in return. They built a society based on mutual value rather than exploitation. Occasionally, ships from council space encountered evidence of human civilization. They found thriving colonies, impressive technology, and cultures that blended human and alien in ways that honored both. These explorers always sent back excited messages, suggesting renewed contact. The humans always politely declined. They had moved on. They had learned the hard way that some relationships were not worth maintaining. They refused to repeat past mistakes. In the council chambers, the human seat remained empty. It became a tradition never to fill it, never to remove it. It stood as a reminder of what had been lost, of what happened when a civilization took for granted those who served it best. Ambassador Thrall cared for his olive tree until his dying day. He never saw it produce fruit. The conditions were not quite right, the soil not quite proper, the climate not quite suitable. It lived, but it did not flourish. Just before he died, Thrall told his daughter, "This tree is like us. We survive, but we have forgotten how to truly live. The humans knew how to live. They knew how to thrive. And we were too proud to learn from them until it was too late." The tree still grows in council space, a small green reminder of the species that walked away. Caretakers follow the instructions left behind, maintaining it out of duty and memory. They look at it and wonder what might have been if pride had not blinded them, and in the empty human embassy. Dust gathers in silent rooms while the galaxy outside struggles to function without the quiet competence of the species it took for granted. The humans are gone. They departed without anger, without demands, without looking back. They simply chose themselves instead of those who would never choose them. And in that choice, they found freedom. The council learned the lesson too late. Some losses cannot be recovered. Some opportunities do not come twice. Some people, once they walk away, are gone forever. And sometimes, the silence they leave behind speaks louder than any words.